If you like the video, please consider supporting James Corp on Patreon. Right, hi everyone. Welcome to our pre-recorded interview with the Tweedmeister himself, Dr. Paul Mitchener. It's myself and Sue who will be interviewing him today. So I'm just going to start with Sue. Sue, why don't you give us a little shout out about of yourself and what your links to Liminal is.
Well, I've been a very keen role player for quite a long time. Urban fantasy has always been one of my favourite genres, but there's not a lot of books in that area. Sadly, I missed the Liminal Kickstarter, but the moment I found out about it on Twitter, I was in there like a shot. And it's been the game I've run most over the last couple of years.
She just ran a campaign as well for us as well. So, if you want to see a really, really good campaign, go watch the previous videos. There's loads of them. There's six episodes, and each story takes about 2 sessions to complete. So, yeah, really good, really, really good.
And the players have told some really good stories about that as well.
Have they?
Yeah, people have been gossiping.
And Paul?
Okay, so I'm Paul Mitchener. I'm known as the Tweedmeister on Twitter. Some forums it's Dr. Mitch. I'm the guy who wrote Liminal, came up with this sort of thing. Yeah, I've been role-playing for quite a few years. And again, writing Liminal, I thought I wanted to... Well, it was just the ideas that I wanted to bring to the table.
So, would that be the first question? So please tell us a bit about yourself.
I haven't said much, but I've said a little bit, haven't I?
Okay, so how did you get started in tabletop role-playing games?
Oh, so this is a good story. So, I can't remember. I was about 13. I was at school. And my friend, who was in the year above me at school, sold me the D&D basic box set, an expert box set. I think it was for a £5 for both of... No, it's a £10 for both of them, £5 each. And he did that because he wanted me to run him a campaign. We had a bunch of players ready. So actually, I DM'd, I guess, in that case, before I played. And the concept was, I can't remember, people were traveling across just a desert full of undead. There was a magic item shop in the middle of the desert. I don't know what it was doing there. I'm sure it seemed a good idea at the time, which they promptly they'd crossed a river where the water's paralysed someone who touched it, which they weaponized and robbed the magic item shop owner.
Fuck.
And then the end of that game session ended with the magic item shop owner, who's actually a reasonably powerful magic user, as you would be, owning a magic item shop in the middle of a desert full of undead, came flying after them, entrapped the whole party in a web, and that's where the session ended. And the next week at school, everyone was passing notes to each other saying, "Oh God, how are we going to get out of this one? We shouldn't have done that." That kind of hooked me. I mean, nowadays players are a bit less psychopathic, which is good.
Yeah, but that's kids though, ain't it? Right?
Of course it is. Of course it is.
We all did silly things like that. Like, it made sense. It didn't.
I mean, I shouldn't have given them a weapon. I didn't know it was going to be a weapon, but I shouldn't have given them something like that if I didn't want them to use it, right?
Well, I assume you put it there as a challenge, right, to get through.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
You didn't expect them to go, let's bottle this fucking resource and use it for our benefits.
Yeah, exactly right. They outwitted me.
How did you get involved in creating RPG books?
Almost. I suppose it started when I went through a phase of seriously over prepping for adventures, and I started writing them up in quite a bit of detail. And then, that was just in the background, really. So what actually started me was an idea I had for... So there's Wild Talents from Arc Dream. That's a superhero role-playing game. So I think we've had Shane Ivey in the chambers here before. So of course he's the owner of Arc Dream. And I had this idea of saying, what about doing superheroes as demigods in ancient Greece? There's a parallel there. So I started writing up loads of stuff, ancient Greek stuff, Wild Talents. and it was intended for a convention game. And I just pitched this to him, and weirdly, he accepted the pitch. I had a lot of stuff written up to show him, and that became the first official publication, which was kind of handy because, got paid for that, and that paid for actually an emergency dentist's bill.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah. Well, which is not such a nice thing to spend it on, but it's a hell of a lot better than emergency dentist bills where you don't suddenly have unexpected, money coming in from something.
So how did you, I mean, but how did that happen? Like, how did you contact, what made you go, what made you contact Shane Ivey? What was like?
I think it's a case, well, where I was writing things up, I thought, this is something I've wanted to do. So I just actually thought, well, why don't I reach out? What's the worst thing that's going to happen? He's just going to say, no.
Oh, that petrifies me personally. Someone said
yeah, but
no.
I wouldn't have been any worse off if he'd said no.
True.
And it's one of those things, I'm not sure, again, sometimes you get the whole thing of someone asking you for advice, how do you get started? And to be honest, this is probably, this is about 10 years ago now. I think things might have probably changed since then. So I'm a terrible person to come to for advice there.
Well,
but I don't think there's any harm in reaching out. And if you find a game you like and you think, you know what, I've got something to bring to the table with this, I really like it, try pitching the idea.
Yeah, Sue.
Yeah, I'm working on it.
We told Sue on Sunday to contact you about all her stories that she's got, and possibly doing a Northampton supplement or something with her stories in it.
We are currently talking.
Yeah.
I'm afraid I outed Sue on Twitter. Because just coming up to this, I thought, okay, I know I'm seeing Sue, and I know Sue wants to do that, something like that, and her stuff is good. I've played several things that Sue's run, and then she sent me it and three case notes, as we're calling the scenarios for Liminal, and they're really good. So yes, those will be published.
A load of old cobblers is what we coined the phrase. Was it Natalie that came up with the name? A load of old cobblers.
What, for Northampton?
Yeah.
Do you have Alan Moore as an NPC for Northampton? That's the interesting one there.
I like to have a wizard lurking in the background.
Yeah.
Unnamed. So what were the influences that caused you to create Liminal? Okay,
so I think I've always liked a lot of histories sort of coming on, and historical role, but even historical role playing. But I think the idea of Liminal, and also not just mainstream history, but little bits and pieces of local history, and especially local folklore and local stories. And really, Liminal's a way to kind of bring those into play. You've got the whole, and the other thing that seems to creep its way into every game I seem to run are things like vampires and fairies and things like that. You've got the ultimate bad guys and the ultimate, I suppose, weird guys. And just that sort of thing creeping its way in. And I thought, well, this is all this thing coming together, and I can do something using sort of British history, British folklore, and this sort of local idea of local legends, and play with that in the modern day and just see where it goes. So it was really fun sort of looking at the write-ups of individual places, for example. And then once you start looking at the sort of a bit of local history, local legends for a particular place, the scenarios almost write themselves.
Really?
Well, it's quite easy to come up with scenario ideas. I think that's probably a fairer thing to say.
So this ain't a question on the list, but what is the most interesting local folklore you've come across?
Well, I mean, it's one of those things where you've got, okay, so I'm just going to ramble a bit before answering that. So, of course, every single village in the country, virtually, apart from new towns, you've got something like a church stuck in the middle of it that's hundreds of years old. And that's kind of incredible. No, of course, it's not the only country that's got that by a long way. But there's that. There's old graveyards. Everywhere where you've got old buildings, you've got ghost stories coming up from that. And then looking into sort of, again, bits of, medieval superstitions, ghosts and fairies, they're superstitions that go together. There's a bit of a blurring of the lines between them. So one thing that started to fascinate me, there's certain things that come up again and again. So one of the things that comes up again and again is sort of, I don't know, black dogs bringing bad luck, ghostly black hounds. Pretty much any way you look, that's there. The other thing you get is the evil old hag. Is it a witch? Is it a fairy? And again, everything gets blurred together there. So it's fun to try and sort of define those things a little bit, just for your stories. Try and work out, okay, what are they really up to? What do they want? What can you do about that? How's that impacting on the world? And I said that whole process is just something I find immensely fun.
And is there any particular ones that stick out for you that you're like, oh, that's really, I didn't know that about that location? Do you know what I mean?
Well, I think the one that started it all for me was, say, again, this isn't in the main Liminal book, so it will be coming. So basically the place where I grew up, which is, village of Netley Abbey near Southampton, the story of, I suppose, local ghosts there's nothing particularly that I know of associated to that ruined abbey. Where there is a lot of stories is actually, again, in the village. There's something called the Royal Victoria Country Park. And in that, there was a 19th century hospital. So it's actually quite well known for, say, for example, treating servicemen from the First World War, although it had its real flush during the Boer War. And this was a massive building. It was 1/4 of a mile long. It was demolished in the 60s with only a chapel remaining. But you've got the thing, walk down, go out there at night, walk around this building 3 times anti-clockwise, and you will see the ghost of the Grey Lady. And again, this is not necessarily striking in the sense that there's an individual story. What's striking is you find that so many places have got stories like that. And that's sort of the inception of the ghost realm. So I think that's probably, like I said, the most striking of the stories I found. I mean, the other thing that's standard, again, another very standard myth that comes into a lot of things, is basically the whole idea of changelings and fairies taking children away and taking babies away, which is really frightening. But also, what's that there's something going on there. What sort of bargain, what sort of pact? There's all sorts of things of that nature. So I don't know if I answered your question now.
I think so, yeah. I might, I do like a lot of our folklore. There's not, like, well, I probably haven't had a proper research, but I don't think there's as much near where I live as there is elsewhere in the country.
Well, of course, one really interesting thing that was made it in the book, I'm going to show you the relevant page because I'm like that now, is of course, Canewdon.
Yeah. I had school friends that came from Canewdon because it was like just up the road. It's it's just around the corner, really, in the grand scheme of. And it's supposed to be the most haunted village in England. Is it?
It's the most haunted village in England, and of course, there's the history of historical association with witches.
Oh, that's
and then there's the fact that Matthew Hopkins, Witchfinder General, hugely, absolute horrible psychopath. That's hundreds of innocent women killed because there was something off with him. I'm not being very sort of neutral about this. But one interesting thing is, of course, some of the spirits in the village, there's stories of, a local magician sort of hanging around the village. But there's stories of some of the spirits, bit ghosts, being ghosts of witches. But the interesting thing there is the Witchfinder General actually left Canewdon alone.
Weird.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And you can start, and of course you start inventing stories there. Why is that true?
I vaguely remember being at school and we weren't allowed to go to Canewdon. We were told explicitly that we were not allowed to go to Canewdon, and if anyone was caught going, you would be expelled from school.
Wow.
On Halloween.
It's a dangerous place.
I don't know why. I don't know what ghosts are there. I don't know why it's so haunted and what is, if there's any significant ghosts there. I don't really know much about it, to tell you the honest truth. And
But it's interesting, isn't it? You've got this whole idea, don't you dare go there on Halloween. It's a horror movie start, isn't it? All these kids saying, oh, I've got to go there at Halloween. Come on, there's a dare.
It could just be that the people who live there are really sick of ghost hunters.
That's true.
Probably that. Or kids, or a rabble of children just turning up and egging everything, right?
There are always, of course, logical explanations.
So what did you enjoy the most about the process of creating Liminal?
I mean, coming up with this idea of looking into bits of, background of places and basically inventing stories around them, inventing these sort of magical, mystical explanations around them. And of course, there's a mixture of things. You can think, oh, isn't this fun? I can build up things like that. Of course, that's where these ghost realms that are local there come from. And then you can just do bits of pure invention as well. For example, let's have some vampires sort of lurking around Queen Elizabeth Hospital or something like that. You can just the idea, it's just, I don't know, a bit of a nice range for my imagination to create stories about this whole thing. I mean, the other thing I think I do want to mention in terms of course, this is later in the process in creating the book, was starting to work with Jason Benker and his artwork, which, as much as the writing absolutely defines it, he absolutely nailed it. And that was so nice to see as that was coming in. It was beautiful.
So technically answered the next question.
Yeah. Well, this is good, right?
Yeah. Well, there is he did the logo for Chambers of Roleplay.
Yes. Yeah. Of course. Yeah. I mean, he's a really nice guy and really talented.
Yeah, he just dropped off the face of the earth, though. For me, I can't seem to contact him at all.
He may just be extremely busy drawing werewolves right now.
Yeah, he is. He's got a lot of werewolves still to draw.
So how did you find him? Did he contact you, or was it?
Oh, so I've got a bit of a history before Liminal going back with Jason. So where I first met him was my earlier book that I was working on with my co-author Graham Spearing, called Age of Arthur, which is basically role playing in the Dark Ages Britain. After the Romans, whole country, being invaded and sacked by Saxons and all that. And that had some of the elements actually that went into Liminal, I think, there as well. For example, there was definite use of the Fae, which makes sense for Arthurian myth anyway. So one thing that was going on there, Graham said, well, once we started taking it seriously, so this was the first self-published thing that I was ever involved in. And Graham said, right, okay, so let's talk about artists. And he said, have you seen this guy, Jason Benker? And I looked at his work and thought, okay, that's incredible. So we had him to do the art for that. And again, that was really inspiring, some of the art for that. And I've got Jason Benker pictures on my living room wall from Age of Arthur. And that was really good. And then the other thing about his work is he gets better and better. So his work for Age of Arthur was really good. we brought out a sort of campaign supplement for Age of Arthur called Time of the Wolves. His work for that was even better. And now he's got to do Liminal. I think it's incredible.
Are you using him for Out of the Ashes as well?
It's not, no, it's John Hodgson who's working on Out of the Ashes. Because John Hodgson is, of course, extremely good, extremely well known in role-playing circles. Jason Benker's not so well known in role-playing circles, but also, yeah, he's got to be busy with the werewolves.
So when playing scenarios written by other people, is there anything that surprised you as a player that you didn't expect as a creator?
Yeah, I mean, that definitely comes up all the time. So there's one thing that sort of, it depends. So, of course, I've played by a couple of people. I mean, there's been some from, of course, from you, and some from Bud's RPG review. So with yours, again, I was really taken by the way you've got sort of, I suppose, people's personalities coming into play and people's motivations. Sometimes they're, you know, it's the everyday caught up in this supernatural thing. And that's maybe not something I've got done quite as well in my, well, no, I don't think I've done it as well in my own scenarios. So it's really nice to see that coming out in play and all these different elements. The other thing I've found with scenarios I've played is the different sort of factions of the liminal world. You know, so there's, you know, Fae courts and, you know, particular groups of werewolves and so on, and P division and things. And it's actually the fact that people have made big use of those sometimes. You know, and that sort of, I don't know why that surprised me, but it did.
Well, people like to put things in organisations, don't they?
Yeah, but it's really, you know, so it's been really nice just playing it.
Have you had any particular favourite moments in these games that you've played as a player rather than as a GM?
I think I loved the scenario where, okay, spoiler alert, but of course it is on Chambers of Roleplay, where first of all we had the child making the rash sort of deal with the Fae that she wanted to be a princess, and therefore, of course, was abducted away. And just the realization, that's what's gone on. That was great. And then, of course, we had the Fae talking in Shakespearean pentameter. That was something else again.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah, you talk like this to make it neater. You know, there's basically 5 stresses per line.
Oh, okay. All right, okay. Yeah, it sounds complicated to me. Do you have any advice for coming up with new stories or adding your own stamp to a pre-written scenario?
Okay, so for coming up with new stories, what I say is I always start by either thinking about the type of sort of thing I want to do. I want a giant in this scenario. Let's look up stories of giants. And again, folk tales about giants. And then sort of start extending from there. The other thing is to start off with a place and drill down locally. And once you do that, you've got things. Think how things are going to go slightly wrong, how that's interfering between, you know, if that comes to the forefront, how people's lives are going to be affected. And then start thinking about why the player characters would be the ones to deal with that and structure it that way. So that's sort of basically, it's almost a where do you get your ideas from type question, but I don't think it's quite that. The other thing, so start playing with things like that. And then again, I did try to go with the sort of liminal book itself, give quite detailed guidelines for structuring scenarios, you know, the initial hook, the starting off in the different locations, first location where things are happening, and looking at a small sequence of events. I mean, that's leading into the other half of this question, which is how do you put your own stamp on this? Of course, the scenario sort of plan here is plotted out as a fairly linear plan. That's fine. That's minimum. That gives enough for the GM to go on. But it's, of course, not what's going to happen in practice. players are going to find their own path, their own clues, and that's something that's you've definitely got to embrace. I mean, in terms of putting your own stamp, move things, change location, bring in local sort of knowledge about that location, things you want to play, areas you want to play with. And again, on the location point of view, there was one reviewer that said, okay, it's a fairly idiosyncratic list of locations in Liminal. I think I know what's happened here. It's a list of places Paul Mitchener has been on holiday, which is not far from the truth.
Well, have you been on holiday to Canuden then? Is that what you're saying?
I haven't been on holiday to Canuden, but that's something.
No.
Yeah, I'll say it's not entirely the story, but a lot of it is true.
It's not
And start playing with different things there. Yeah, so for example, I have been to Port Merion. I've seen The Prisoner. Of course, Port Merion had to go into Liminal.
What's The Prisoner? What do you mean?
The old 1960s TV program.
Oh, okay. The one where
So,
he goes, I'm a
things
man,
like
not
that
a number.
Yeah, exactly that. So that's one way to put your own stamp on it. I mean, the other thing as well, the scenarios are all quite short. There are going to be details the GM's going to have to fill in and invent, and that's by intention. Elaborate on that. Even taking, for example, the first scenario in the core rule book, talking about the Goblin Market, and of course that's a poem, the Goblin Market, but that was one of the ideas coming in there. Also playing with York, but within the market, this fairy market within York, I've given basically about 2 or 3 ideas of stalls and things like that, and things the fairies are selling there. But you should certainly have fun coming up with your own things there, more interesting things going on, more NPCs, either doing it on the fly, or planning that.
Okay,
I mean, that's another thing that's planning it on the fly as well, is sometimes you find that players just get, I don't know, fascinated by a particular NPC for some reason. And actually in your GM notes, all you've got for the NPC is the name. Maybe not even that. Maybe you just made up the name on the spot. And that's interesting. You've got to invent things. So certainly one of my campaigns I was running, one NPC got quite important because they warned this NPC, look, a red cap is going to try and kill you. And of course, I had fun playing out the response where he's, for some particular strange reason, not very believing of this. And he kept popping up around the place. And whenever he saw the player characters, he saw these lunatics and ran away from them.
Did you get killed by a red cap?
No, they managed to save him from the red cap. He was just very scared of them. He never saw the red cap. They don't know what he did for them.
I was trying to say, for the Fey Market, you could watch Hellboy 2, right, where he goes to the Fey Market.
I think that's true. I think any sort of inspirational media, whatever it is, whether it's something you've read, something you've watched, absolutely, bring it in. File off the serial numbers and you're good to go.
I think we're on to the questions from subscribers now. And the first one is mine. So what is your favourite monster?
My favourite monster, I'm probably going to go with, again, sorry, I'm a bit of a one-note person here, but I'm thinking, again, take a powerful, one of the most powerful Fae, because they're so, I know you've got this whole thing, they're capricious, they're inexplicable, they're not necessarily malevolent, they might be. I mean, alien. The way I think of the Fae,
alien.
It's not just alien, you've got this immensely powerful creature that's got the emotional maturity of a 3-year-old. That's frightening. I mean, one way I think about it sometimes is, okay, this is going way back, but remember Blackadder 2 and the portrayal of Queen Elizabeth there, where, you know, she is basically, again, she's the queen, she's almost all powerful. She's also this sort of somewhat spiteful little girl.
I haven't watched Blackadder in a long time.
No, but Queen
I
Elizabeth from Blackadder is one of the Fae. That's my take.
Oh, okay.
That's how I'd play one of the Fae. And that's just such fun to play with as GM. Because, of course, one thing I do like in role-playing games is when you're coming up with something that the player characters, they can't just attack it. They've got to deal with it, but they can't deal with it directly. They've got to come at it sideways. And again, I do remember one sort of fairy lord, again in the mortal realm, that the player characters basically distracted by saying, look, I'm going to show you something wonderful, and gave it a smartphone. Look, you can get music here. You can get news from all around the world. You get all these different things. It's at your fingertips. It's an amazing magical thing. Now, what can I have in exchange for this?
We during the campaign, when we were having to deal with the Fae, I was like, just off the cuff, I was like, there must be like lawyers out there that just deal solely with the Fae.
Oh, these sort of contracts, yeah. I mean, yeah, absolutely. I've also got a soft spot for vampires, for the opposite reason to the Fae, because I think the way I see vampires is they are just horrible monsters. You've got to stop them. And that's quite refreshing. You know, sometimes you just want a straight up fight. That's okay. But yeah, you're right. The having actually, like I say, making sure the contracts are absolutely watertight. All your verbal agreements are watertight. That's important with the Fae.
Must be a nightmare.
Yeah.
Must be a nightmare to have to deal with that. Because Neil said something during the break. He was like, there is an idea there that, you know, funny you mentioned that. But that's what I'm going to say.
I can see P Division having lawyers who are specifically tasked with that sort of thing.
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, that whole, like, I think the whole, like, I don't know if the Fae will get overused in Liminal, like, because they're quite a common, in most adventures I've played, they have been quite predominant in as the threat in the story. Yeah,
I think it's interesting. So, of course, there's some things that do seem to be. So when I was first doing the sort of series of Liminal adventures, I think I'd had 3 at the time. I was thinking, damn, I've got 3 in a row and they're all vampires. So I put an instruction out to early writers, sort of no more vampires for a while.
I guess
vampires. I mean, now I think there's enough of a mix. Probably the main things, it's werewolves and ghosts that are less used.
Well, you'd be glad to see that 2 of the 3 stories that we redid, one was about ghosts and one was about werewolves, right?
Yep.
So, and one of them was about and the ghost one also included a water spirit as well. So we had that as well. So
yeah, I mean, I think that's also fun to do the Fae as a sort of minor background element. Well, not minor background element, but something that's not the main focus of the scenario. So again, you've got things going on. There's a river, there's some sort of river involved. Why not have a Fae spirit of the river pop up to complicate things? Maybe even help. Yeah, why not have that there?
Or just get angry at us because the body's being dumped in its.
Oh, that's perfect.
Or as certain people have done in my adventures, take her on a date.
Well, yes, I did do that, didn't I? I mean, that's obviously I'm very charming, and what greater reward would effectively a goddess want? Clearly, it's to go on a date with some scruffy weather wizard.
We had to make a deal. We had to owe her a favour to because we did the goat. Yeah, because you played in the same one that we did. Yeah, because you did the
And that's the favour
Ghost
was
Realm
that. Sure, I'll take you out for dinner.
You didn't have to travel all the way to Cardiff, did you?
Yes, we did. We did travel to Cardiff to deal with those who were behind it. Let's just say I don't want to give too many spoilers for Sue's scenarios.
Well, they can watch the entire thing.
That's true, actually. If they're on here, they've seen these. That's true.
Well, they might not. They might just watch the interview, right? They might just stick to watching the interview and the review, maybe. So yeah. Jay will asks if you could work on any property, what would it be?
Oh, that's a tough one. So, I mean, I don't want to sort of out any names. I mean, there was one thing that was quite big that I was working on, and that got sort of cancelled, and that broke my heart. So that's a bit tough to think about working on big properties. But if I was going to, but let's ignore that side of things. So, in terms of existing properties, so for first edition, again with Graham, I sort of co-wrote an adventure for the One Ring. I'd love to do something like that again. In terms of sort of dream properties, in terms of sort of bringing certain, we're looking at bringing books and films and so on to RPGs. So I'm thinking, that's a good question. Let's be really strange and fantastic and say, I reckon the time's ripe for a new Moorcock RPG, and that would be something that's really good to work. That would be really good to work on.
A what?
If anyone's a new Michael Moorcock fantasy type RPG, so that would be really good to work on. Someone should hire me for that.
I don't even know what that is.
So Michael Moorcock's basically a fantasy author, the person who came up with with things like Elric and the Black Sword. So it's really fun, pulpy stuff, very quick to read. It's, and I think that would be a fantastic. And again, there have been RPGs based on that, quite a few. That would be an interesting thing to make a comeback. If I'm dreaming, I'm gonna say something that probably no one's heard of.
I didn't heard of the last thing, so
yeah. So there's a sequence of books called the Saga of the Exiles. So I don't know if she's still alive now. I don't think she is, Julian May. And the whole hypothesis of this is it's said in the future. The future's kind of utopian, but some people just don't fit in. Fortunately, someone has discovered a way to travel at one particular location backwards in time by a few million years to the Pliocene era, so post-dinosaurs, pre-humanity. And people who really aren't fitting in decide to go through this gateway, one way back in time. And what they find in the gateway is there's a civilization of two warring peoples, roughly based on Irish mythology. And like I said, they're fun books. Again, nothing to. And I think that would make an amazing RPG setting. And I'm sort of surprised it hasn't been done. But of course, it's not well enough known to bring in the big bucks, I'd imagine.
She passed away. Julian Claire May, right?
That's right, yeah.
Author. Yeah, she passed away on October the 17th, 2017.
Yeah, so fairly recently then, okay.
Yeah, very recent, yeah.
Next question is from Ryan. I think we may actually have covered this. and he says he'd like to know about the process you went through to go from the project idea to a finished book.
Okay, so in terms of the idea, I mean, actually, this lets me just tell another story just for the hell of it. I think that's what I'm meant to be doing, right? I'm meant to be keeping you all entertained with stories.
Yeah.
So to tell another story, what I was doing, I was just sort of noodling away in my spare time, just trying to write things, trying to form mechanics, looking things up and trying to wake up sort of place locations and so on. So it's a case of trying to structure that into a book. I already put together an outline. What the final impetus to get it finished was actually, I was then, well, there was a strike. And I think the strike amounted to a total of 3 weeks. And that sent me into a bit of a panic, when I knew the strike was going to happen. Because I thought, I'm not sure I can afford to lose 3 weeks' pay. So what shall I do? What shall I do? Well, it might work. Let's try a Kickstarter. And that gave me the real push to get this finished. So I suppose the one answer to the question is, why did I do Liminal? Would be because I needed the money. That's the but it's also why it came out in, I think, obviously it probably would have been done at some point anyway, but it's just playing around with that. And then a lot of things I had to learn as I go. So, okay, fortunately, I had put books together before. So I'd put books together, so there's Age of Arthur I worked on with Graham. There's various books I'd worked on with Newport at D101 Games. And so by then I knew the process of putting things together. Where Liminal was a bit different, it was the first sort of Kickstarter I'd led. Well, I was in charge. And also, I had the initial plan thinking, well, okay, it'll be, I'll get a bit of art, maybe one piece per chapter, and do the Kickstarter and then launch it as print on demand. And it kind of exploded under me. And that was absolutely joyful. Of course, it's brilliant, but it was a lot to, then it's suddenly a case of, okay, there's big expectations here. And also, first starting, trying to think, okay, how do I go about printing it? So then when it's coming to going about printing it, I tried, okay, I mean, I'm assuming you've both seen sort of print on demand books. When you've got really glossy artwork like in Liminal, it really doesn't work. So that led to me talking to printers, and again, learning as I'm going. And then I didn't print enough because I thought, okay, I'm going to need to find, if I'm doing this, let's actually get it into distribution. And that's what led to me talking to Modiphius about that. Sent them a PDF, and it's a case of, well, come on, what do you think? Can we do this? And fortunately, they liked the PDF. And that just led to things going further and further. And of course, but for a while, it was hard to find Liminal.
Did you find a lot of, did you find more, because it exploded under you, did you find you had more pressure to release a more polished book, I guess would be the...
I think partially, but also, I don't know. I mean, I think the book at least managed to sort of exceed expectations. I don't think people were expecting so much out of it. And of course, getting something so polished, a lot of that was with Jason Benker's art coming through again. And the good thing is we had the budget to give him sort of free rein and say, hey, come on, do stuff. And that's what really made it. It's almost a case of, before the Kickstarter, I had a fantasy sort of thinking, well, if I was publishing my own book, what would I do if I had a art budget running, much higher? And that's basically what Liminal was, really, in terms of a product there. I mean, the other thing was, the Kickstarter funds, where things went, it didn't quite cover it. So when I was trying to do it again, I wanted actually a decent sized print run. And I had to take out a bank loan to do that.
Oh God!
The Kickstarter fund's gone.
So it didn't actually cover the full completion of the product.
It did cover the completion of product in the sense of getting it to backers, and probably about 100 or so left over. But doing a print run of 1,500 books, which I never thought it would sell that many. I mean, it's now on the second print run, so clearly it did. But the idea of that, getting a print run of that many books, had never occurred to me.
Did you have to make any on the second printing? Did you make any adjustments to the text or any cover any of the?
I didn't, because I thought I'd do a full-on sort of, well, not exactly second edition, but I don't know, 1.05 edition or something if I was going to do that. So I just, because I wanted to get it back in print as quickly as possible, I just left it the same.
Fair enough. Was there much errors in there?
There's probably about a page of errata.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
That's
the problem
not bad.
is then when you're doing that, you're starting filling in errata, and now I start thinking, okay, what would I like to change? What would I like to tweak? And there's a few things there as well. It's a never-ending process once I start going down that road.
We did think of a source book that you can come up with that you could do as well while we were playing a campaign of it, and it was actually Neil that brought it up. He was like, "There's options for being a wizard, like being a magic user. There's loads of options you can take, lots of options. But if you're just more or less a mundane person, there's a very limited amount of advances you can take."
That's true, actually. Yeah.
So
one thing Neil was saying was, I can't remember, a sort of early feedback, because of course Neil really likes his urban fantasy, and he was working with me nearly from the start.
Yeah, as the rules wrangler, whatever that is.
Yeah. Well, he was saying, look, this rule doesn't work. This particular advantage, that's broken. This particular advantage, that's underpowered. And saying, we don't have enough options for people doing this sort of thing. So there's a lot of sort of tweaking from what Neil said. Yeah, we always liked the fundamentals of the rules, but there's a lot of sort of saying, yeah, this isn't good. Let's look at the relative power of things, and we need more of this sort of thing. So that went in there. But also, I mean, what Neil said was sort of when I first started writing it, he wrote to me and said, look, I want to be part of this. This is so far up my street. It's in my house and sitting on my lap purring. So
I can imagine him saying that.
And of course, Neil is also, very experienced with doing this sort of thing. So he's a good person to have on board.
So our suggestion is do a book with more advances in it. Just more options.
I think that's the thing to do, and probably what I would do is maybe squeeze that into another book, because I wouldn't want a book that's just mechanics, I think.
Fair enough. Our ever-loving Scott asks, you cite several influences, but do you recall what was the initial spark that ignited the Liminal inception? And what was the length of time from the point of the first available book in the world? So from that point to the first available book in the world.
Oh gosh, so it was probably about a year. Well, let's see. So it was probably about a year from ideas to Kickstarter, and then probably nearly another year from Kickstarter to release of the book.
About 2
so
years
I think there was ideas that were coming in. So looking at I suppose the absolutely key things there. So, okay. So firstly, there's sort of some parts of Neil Gaiman, specifically Neverwhere. I'm reluctant to say this because, of course, it's getting a game of its own, but it's pretty clear the influence of Rivers of London. And another big book, and again, that was a BBC TV series, especially in terms of how I saw the Fae, was actually Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. So that's an enormous book. And there was a 6-part BBC, I can't remember, 7-part BBC TV series, which is also very good. And I'm just going to look through, actually, I'm going to look through my own list here, because thinking about other things that were really key here. So, and then I started sort of reading around. So you mentioned Hellblazer, that there's a bit of that in there. Reading around again in terms of stories.
I thought it was Hellboy.
Yeah, Hellboy, sorry, not Hellblazer. Yeah, you mentioned Hellboy. But also there's bits and pieces. So in terms of TV series, there was a bit of a rush of these sort of supernatural type TV series, more or less just before it started. So there's things like, Supernatural. There was things like the Sleepy Hollow TV series. And going back quite a few years before that, there's Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Well, Buffy changed the way television was done, right? That's how influential
what Buffy did was you had the idea of the combination of episodes and story arc, which is almost standard now. So yeah, absolutely. But having those sort of different influences together. Probably another book I'd like to call out here would be maybe one called The Historian, which is a vampire novel, but it's incredibly subtle. But that's a fun read too.
I'm not a very strong reader of novels.
Yeah, I'm trying to build. That's why I'm trying to get across a bit of a mixture.
I vaguely. I remember watching a lot of children when I was younger. A lot of children's televisions, which was all a bit, very, especially like BBC ones. Like, is it the Night Garden, or was that a really young one? Or was it the Moon? Or is it called the Moon Dial? I can't remember. I remember.
There were things like that, weren't there? We were growing up with. I mean, my big influence in terms of TV like that I grew up with. Do you remember Robin of Sherwood?
No, it was before. I think it was on before I was really old enough to really watch it. And then when I've tried watching it a few years ago, it was a bit shit.
It possibly doesn't hold up today, but the amount of nostalgia I have for that is incredible.
Yeah, there were a ton of these supernatural kids dramas when.
Yeah, absolutely, that's true.
Yeah, there are a lot of adaptations of Alan Garner, which obviously is going to include quite a bit of old British and Welsh mythology.
Yeah, and Alan Garner's actually a good source on this sort of thing in terms of inspiration.
I remember one that I can't even remember what it was called, but I know it had a candle involved. There was a spirit, like a ghost involved in it that was if they didn't leave a saucepan of milk or cream or whatever out for it, it would wreck the house. So they'd always leave a saucepan of milk out or whatever for it to drink and tidy the house because of it. And it had a candle in it, and it had elements of King Arthur in it. I can't even fucking remember what it was called, but yeah, it was a long time ago. But yeah, there was loads of them that were sort of based around those sort of. I guess it is urban fantasy, right?
Yeah, it was urban. Some things that would say were urban fantasy before urban fantasy was almost really an established genre, but these type of supernatural things in the modern day. I mean, I'll probably put the first, I don't know, Sue probably knows this better than me, but I know probably one of the first urban fantasy would be probably War for the Oaks.
I don't know that one.
It's War for the Oaks. It's a novel by, I think it's Emma Bull. Yeah.
Never read it. Never heard of it. Is it good? Is it worth a read?
It's definitely worth a read. Yeah.
Do you want to ask Scott's next question? So,
Yep. Were there specific setbacks or roadblocks, and how did you overcome them? That's either during the creative process or during production.
I don't know. I mean, in terms of creative process, it was one of those things. So I nearly always work on more than one thing at once. So, like a lot of the projects that have got completed, I can't remember what else I was working on, but Liminal, I was basically working on the background when I should have been doing something else in role playing. But this was actually, it went fairly smoothly. So, okay, I've described some of the sort of rules discussion. So obviously some of the early playtests things weren't quite ideal in terms of how they went, but that wasn't necessarily a problem. That's just what you expect from playtests. I mean, that's why you playtest. I mean, in terms of hitches in bringing things to completion, I think it's a case of, whoa, this is bigger than I thought. I mean, the other thing I'll say, and this is true for everyone doing Kickstarters, of course, it took longer than I thought. So in this case, it was only 2 months late, which is nothing in Kickstarter world, but it's still kind of a failure, right?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, you produced a decent looking book. It has page numbers. You filled out all the things that you had to fill out. You didn't just like, yeah. It is a good quality book. I wouldn't call it a failure. Just a delay is a delay.
It was no. I mean, it's not a failure of a book. That's certainly not what I'm saying. I'm saying that it was slightly later than I'd hoped.
Yeah.
Again, this is one of those things. I probably ought to say this just for the benefit of sort of viewers. Sometimes I say silly things that people take a bit too seriously. So there was one early interval, where it was hard to get copies in print of Liminal. And I just said, well, it's hard work. I've got to go down to my shed and bind lots of books. And a few people took that literally. I sort of, no, Liminal is not handmade by me in my shed.
Do you even have a shed?
I do have a shed. It's got a broken window in. It's full of garden equipment and I think various bits of rubbish.
And spiders.
Certainly spiders. It's a Liminal place, my shed.
This is the last question from Scott. If there was a ukulele artifact in Liminal, what would it do? This is a very silly question.
I mean, you've got to have the whole thing, the whole Crossroads thing. You know, Robert Johnson sold his soul at the Crossroads to play the guitar. I think there's some idiot who sold his soul to play the ukulele, and that seems a really silly idea. Great, it's going to bring me great fame and wonder. No, you can just play the ukulele, and you've got no soul.
Yeah, this is a question from Neil Dow, and he asks, when are we going to start the extensive research for the Liminal Pub Guide?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? The Liminal Pub Guide was something that I think lockdown frankly delayed it. I mean, over the summer, we attempted to do a little bit of research in Carlisle, but yeah, I mean, 2022, I think, is the year for the pub guide research. Travel around the country and go to different pubs.
Sounds good. And have lots of scampi fries, yeah?
Absolutely. Scampi fries in every pub. Or at least those that serve them. That'll be the review. The reviews will be sort of numbers of scampi fries packets consumed.
I don't even know. I've never seen a pub sell them.
No, I don't think I have either. They certainly used to.
So we've got some more questions. These are from Reddit, Facebook, and I think that's it. Oh yeah, I think these are questions from like Reddit and Facebook, maybe Twitter as well. So Maud 4K from Reddit asks 2 questions.
Oh.
Are there plans to flesh out the rest of the world, or are they going to stay UK centric for a while?
So it'll probably be UK centric for a while, but one thing I will mention is, of course, there are upcoming translations into other languages. There's already a Spanish translation. The German translators are interested in working with me to bring actually a Liminal Germany book out.
That's interesting. Any other translations?
Well, in terms of translations, the Spanish exists. The German will be coming out. The other, there's also one into Brazilian Portuguese. And finally, this is the interesting thing. So there's a Korean translation coming out. And finally, there's a Japanese translation in the works.
Really?
So yeah, it's surprisingly popular in Japan.
And is it a straight translation, or is it?
It's a straight translation in this case. Yeah.
So they're going to be playing. Okay, all right.
I guess it's like us watching anime.
I suppose it makes sense because Call of Cthulhu is enormously popular in Japan.
Yeah, absolutely. So that, yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing. I think you've got to the nub of it there, Sue, which is the center of role playing in Japan is this type of, investigative supernatural type thing. Which, and that Liminal definitely fits into that genre.
I mean, they must have a wealth of their own for bloody spirits and stuff, right?
Yeah. But like I said, sometimes I think it's a case of looking towards the exotic.
I guess so. For them, it would be pretty mundane, won't it? Really? Well, not mundane, but yeah. Okay. Yeah, I get it. Maybe we can do. Maybe you could speak to the Japanese translator and do a Japanese place book.
Yeah, we should go. I think that would be really interesting to do.
He also asks, do demons exist in Liminal, like Devil in the Crossroad type thing? I think you just mentioned that as well.
I'm actually saying explicitly. I think explicitly, no. There are, of course, ghosts of, say, dead magicians who are immensely powerful and dangerous and could be seen like demons. There's vampires. They're pretty demonic. There's, oh God, a powerful werewolf is a monster. And then, of course, the fairies can always play tricks. But in terms of the supernatural sort of demons from hell, no, those don't exist in Liminal. And that's a deliberate move.
Fair enough.
Yeah, this is from Jay Button on Facebook. He would like to know more about the werewolf book, what it's going to cover and when it's likely to come out.
Okay, so I'm hoping that the PDF at least will be out this year. It's a question of how quickly Jason Benker can draw all his werewolves. So this book's going to be absolutely, really lavish. In terms of what's covered, it's, let's see, one thing that it does that's interesting and different is that, okay, Becky, who's the author of the Werewolves book. So I think the impression from the main Liminal book is, how should I put it, the Jaeger family are kind of bad guys. In the main Werewolf book, there's a greatly more nuanced view of the Jaeger family. Essentially saying the werewolves, we need to unite. Otherwise, we're just going to get overrun. Because they're almost the underdogs of the, pun intended, of the supernatural factions. They're the working class faction. They're not posh like wizards. They're not posh like fairies or vampires. They're the non-posh faction. And there's some of that coming through. And the other thing is, of course, they're all passion and rage. In terms of interesting things, there's certainly, a mention of who's who in the werewolf world, famous wolves. There's a take on the Hound of the Baskervilles as a werewolf. There's a take on the Black Dog myths. And finally, another thing I think I want to mention is Sheffield is actually Werewolf Central HQ in the Liminal world. And there's a bit of that in the book. And finally, I should say one thing that's interesting in terms of mechanics, well, it's made very, very narrative mechanically, is the unit of werewolves isn't the individual werewolf, it's the pack. And there's rules for basically the magic of werewolf packs. So, it's going to be a really nice book.
Look forward to seeing it. I've got to do the Humble Bundle. Is it the Humble Bundle? Or is it the
bundle of holding? Yeah.
Yeah, I've got to wait till the weekend when I get paid. At the moment, I'm a bit fucking broke, but I'll do that because I haven't got the Liminal book, the Londinium book. I haven't got it.
So I should say that for the benefit of anyone else really there. So for, I think it's $9.95, you can get everything that's so far been published for Liminal in PDF. So that includes the main Liminal book, Pax Londinium, and a lot of individual adventures.
Eventually, Sue's own little book as well.
Sue's will be added to this list of adventures. And of course, one thing that's planned after the Werewolves book, I mean, the book after the Werewolves book is actually the Fae book. But another thing we're developing is compiling these adventures into, a nice solid hardback with all new art.
That is actually the next question. From Gordon Richards from Facebook asks, I've read about a forthcoming werewolf book and a Fae book. What else is in the pipeline?
Okay, so in terms of books, yes. So firstly, there is the Book of Adventures, which will be compiling the case notes already released, a few others, some that are yet to come. Again, I'm nodding meaningfully at Sue here. And then there's, as well as that, there is Novocastria, which is basically Liminal Newcastle. It's actually going a bit beyond Liminal Newcastle. It's the Liminal Northeast. So that actually, as well as being sort of area guide, it's an interesting thing of looking at a very extensive ghost realm underlying Newcastle. And again, looking at the general area, there's material on Durham, where Durham is the centre of the Order of St. Bede, the sort of religious faction of the Liminal world. So there's a bit more material on them in that book. And so that's, again, already written and edited after the Fae book. The Adventures book I've mentioned. I think the one other book I want to mention that is, again, probably about 70% written is a book I'm calling The Liminal Kingdom. And again, there's several authors contributing to that, where it's essentially an extensive sort of list of further places. So, so for example, we haven't said anything much about, I don't know, Birmingham in the main Liminal book. It's a big city. Let's say something about there. There's relatively few locations in sort of Wales that are covered. So let's say something about that. We haven't mentioned Edinburgh. My goodness, that's a great Liminal place. And, that's something you can put there. Not everything's big cities. There's obviously more obscure locations we'll be putting in.
Okay.
So I think Sue's eyeing me up because of Liminal sort of Northampton.
Yeah.
So we should probably talk about that after the show.
Yeah, this is from Matt Nixon, also on Facebook. There was some talk early on about there being an open game license on the Liminal system, and he wondered if that was still going to happen.
So I think the thing is, it's going to happen eventually, because I've kind of stopped myself being able to do this, sort of. So I'll explain. So of course, it was a Kickstarter stretch goal for Liminal, which didn't fund. It's become a Kickstarter stretch goal. It was a Kickstarter for Out of the Ashes, both Liminal and Out of the Ashes coming out in sort of having open licenses. So as you may have seen, Liminal announced the Ashes. They're not the same system, but they're certainly cousins. And now I think in terms of getting a funded sort of system license document, there's currently a Kickstarter going on actually by, again, my friend Newt at D101 Games for actually a cyberpunk game based on the Liminal system called Reboot the Future. And that again has, we're working with him on a Liminal SRD as a possible stretch goal for that, which is not yet funded. So if that funds, that will be prioritized. If that doesn't fund, it's something that will be done eventually. And if anyone really does want to do something with Liminal, working with their own system, then they should come to me. I mean, one thing I don't plan to do necessarily is open license, how shall I put it, the Liminal world and the Liminal arts. That won't be happening necessarily, but the system, I think that's going to happen at some point.
Cool. I think that is it. That's all the questions.
Hooray! We did it.
So
yeah, so thanks everyone for your questions. That was really good talk, good fun.
Where can they find you if people want to message you, or well, maybe not message you, but maybe tweet at you, or
probably the easiest place to find me would be the Tweedmeister at Twitter. So certainly feel free to follow me there. And I might follow you back. You never know. You might be really lucky. No, I'm joking. But yeah, find me there, and it'll be good to chat.
Cool. And how long is these bundle of holdings on for? How long have they got to? I
think it's another 2 weeks from this. So from time of recording, that's 2 weeks from Wednesday. Say just over a week from time of recording.
Okay, cool.
I know I'm a maths lecturer, but I can't do the sums.
I should be. I should have the money by then. I get money on the weekend, so we'll see.
That's great.
But other than that, thank you, Paul, for answering our questions. Thank you for being a good interviewee, whatever the word is.
Yeah, no, thanks for being good interviewers and for having me on as a guest. It's been a pleasure.
Have you watched any of it yet? Have you watched or listened to the pod? Because I've got loads of options now where you can listen to it. You can listen to it as a podcast, or you can watch it on YouTube.
I've watched some of the things on YouTube. Yes, I won't say I've watched all of them.
Are you missing out if you have? If you haven't, or if you want to play them, I guess that makes sense that you don't want to watch them. So where can we find you?
I'm also findable on Twitter under the name Savage Spiel. Despite what people seem to sometimes assume, despite the word spiel, I'm not German.
Spiel.
I just like the alliteration.
Fair enough. As for me, that will be at the end of the review section, so don't worry about me. But yeah, thank you again, Paul, for your hour and 20 minutes that we've taken of your evening, and we hope to see you soon, because I'm sure we'll get you on at some point for one of the actual test chamber shows.
I'm sure I'll play. I hope I'll play some more games here. So it's been fun, all the ones I've done.
Yeah, we're going to be doing at some point, once Neil's sorted it out, we're going to be doing his Napoleonic thing as well.
Oh, what the new Duty and Honor, or the Empire system, as he's calling it.
Yeah, second edition that he's going to kickstart at some point next year, I think.
That's another one I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, we're going to try and time it so that it sort of, we can at least get some of it out before the Kickstarter starts, to sort of help him have a example of actual play on his on the Kickstarter.
Oh, that's a good idea.
But yeah, thank you for your time, and we will see you soon.
Oh, certainly, yeah.
Because I can't go to the bloody pub anymore. Anyway, thank you very much, and we'll see you later.
See you.
Bye, everyone.
Take care. Bye.
Don't forget, you can support me on Patreon over at patreon.com/JamesCorp. And also get your name here in the credits. I'd like to thank Eric Sherper, Weefs, Orcus Dorcas, Matt Jones, Mike Nudd, Ludovic, Giuseppe, and J-Wall. Thank you very much for your continued support. Most appreciated. Bye.